My name is Suraj Pandit, and today I will be giving a presentation about King Harsha of Kashmir. The long history of the Kashmir Valley, which spans over more than 5,000 years, may be divided into the following 7 historical periods. First came the Hindu period, which lasted for more than 3,000 years. Following that was the Muslim period, which lasted for about 200 years. After that came the Mughal period, which lasted for about another 200 years. Following that was Afghan rule, which lasted for less than a century. Then came Sikh rule, and then Dogra rule, which lasted for about a century. Following that was the post-accession rule, starting in 1947 and continuing to the present day. During the Hindu period, there were 4 dynasties: the Kushan dynasty, the Karkuta dynasty, the Utpala dynasty, and the Lahora dynasty. Harsha was born in 1059 AD. He was the king of the Lahora dynasty and ruled Kashmir from 1089 to 1101 AD. Nara, the king of Darbabisara, was the founder of the Lahora dynasty. His descendant was Chandana. Chandana had a son named Sinharaja. From Sinharaja sprung Udayaraja and Kantiraja. Udayaraja was the ancestor of Harshadeva, whereas Kantiraja was the ancestor of Uchala and Susala, 2 distant cousins of Harshadeva. This is an ancient map of the Kashmir Valley. As you can see, there is a city called Parispura, which means City of Pleasures. Parispura is located nearby modern-day Srinagar, and it was also the capital from which the legendary Kashmiri king Laltadatiya Muktapid ruled. The last years of King Kalasha were estranged by distrust and misgivings between him and his son Harsha. Harsha was a youthful prince, inclined to overindulgence and associated with people of questionable character. His father didn't approve of his extravagance, and didn't provide him adequate allowances to meet his spendthrift lifestyle. This irritated the prince, and taking advantage of his disposition, his evil-minded associates implicated him in a conspiracy to kill his father and grab the throne. Infuriated by Harsha's conduct, his father decided to imprison him and deprive him of the royal succession. Towards the end of his life, King Kalasha installed his younger son, Utkarsa, the ruler of Kashmir. After Utkarsa was crowned, he kept Harsha imprisoned and refused to grant him the option to leave the kingdom and retire abroad. With his diplomacy, Harsha secured help from his prison guards and his half-brother, Vijayamala, who raised an open rebellion and attacked King Utkarsha. After being defeated and humiliated, Utkarsa committed suicide. In the midst of the prevailing chaos and confusion, Harsha seized the power and became the king of Kashmir. Utkarsa ruled the valley for a total of 22 days. Harsha, who attained the royal power at a young age after most experiencing sudden changes of fortune, is undoubtedly the most striking figure among the later Hindu rulers of Kashmir. His many and varied attainments and the strange contrast in his character must have greatly influenced the minds of his contemporaries. We see these impressions duly reflected in the elaborate description of Harsha's character which Gulhan gives us in Rajatarangini. Gulhana's description is based on first-hand information, such as that given by his own father, Ganpaka, who himself was a minister in the royal court of King Kalasha. Gulhana depicts King Harsha as a youth of powerful personality and a great personal beauty, courageous and fond of display. He was well versed in various sciences and lover of music and art. The songs which he composed were still very popular in Gulhana's days. Rajatarangini, in an eloquent passage, emphasizes the strongly contrasting qualities of Harsha's mind an equally strong contrast in his actions. He was cruel yet kind-hearted, liberal yet greedy, cunning and thoughtless. These apparently incompatible features in turn display themselves in Harsha's strange life. In Rajatarangani, Kalhana hits the keynote in Harsha's character when he insists on the excessiveness with which all these qualities asserted themselves in Harsha's actions. It is said that a modern psychologist could easily gather from Kalhana's account of Harsha's character and reign that Harsha suffered from a kind of dementia. At the commencement of his rule, Harsha exhibited wise forbearance in retaining many of his father's officials and trusted servants, notwithstanding their former conduct towards himself. It was probably due to this prudent policy in the beginning that when his brother Vijayamala became disgruntled and conspired against Harsha, no dangerous uprising followed. Vijayamala had to seek refuge far away across the mountains, where he was soon killed by an avalanche. This event consolidated Harsha's position. Rajatarangani provides a glowing account of the splendor of Harsha's court during the period immediately following his coronation. Harsha started his rule in a remarkable way and became famous in northern India. His court was a center of luxury and splendor. He introduced new fashions in dress and ornaments. His ministers were gorgeously dressed, wore earrings and headdresses, which previously only members of the ruling family wore. Harsha also issued new silver and gold coins which bore his name. From indications given by Kalhana, it may be concluded that Kashmir did enjoy a brief period of unusual affluence and prosperity in the beginning of Harsha's rule. Several expeditions that Harsha took in the midst of his dissipations only served to progressively decay his own energy. His personal expedition to invade Rajapuri, a neighboring territory, failed because of treason of one of his trusted officers named Sunna. A subsequent expedition to the fort of Dugdgata failed due to early fall of snow, and the royal forces were forced to retreat. Simultaneously, an attack by the Dards on Harsha's retreating forces ended the expedition more disastrously. At this event, Uchala and Susala, the two sons of Malla, who were descendants from a side branch of the Lahora dynasty and destined to succeed Harsha, first came to prominence by the personal bravery they displayed during this attack on Harsha's forces. The extravagant expenditures in the army and senseless indulgence in costly pleasures gradually put Harsha in deep financial troubles. To free himself of these troubles, Harsha decided to amass the silver and gold reserves of the temples and sacred shrines to restore his depleted treasury. It was the incidental discovery of the treasures hoarded at the temple of King Bhima Sahi that turned Harsha's attention to this method of replenishing his treasury. After the temple treasures were ransacked, Harsha began confiscating the divine images in order to acquire the valuable metal of which they were made.
Kalhana records the strange fact that as a first step the sacred images were systematically defiled through outcast beggars. For these shameful acts, Kalhana nicknamed Harsha Druksha, or Muslim. Harsha destroyed both Hindu and Buddhist temples, and is credited with creating an office of Devotpatana Nayaka, meaning destroyer of gods. In Kalhana's time, Buddhism was flourishing in Kashmir, and was not yet considered a distinct religion from Hinduism. However, with careful analysis of all of the available literature, it appears that Harsha was definitely only looting temples for gold and not for ideological reasons.
Harsha's court was a center of luxury, extravagance, follies, and misdeeds, which financially strapped his kingdom. To replenish his depleted treasury, in addition to robbing the temples of their treasures, he imposed special taxes on the land and other property. Kalhana cites numerous shameful acts of Harsha that furnish unmistakable proof of the king's insanity. These calamities, combined with Harsha's misrule, led eventually to an uprising under his arch enemies. the two royal princes, Uchala and Susala. As recorded in Rajatarangani, the year 1099 brought natural calamities upon the land. A plague was raging, robbers were looting the people, and a flood occurred, which resulted in famine and universal suffering. The fiscal exactions of the king, however, continued unabated. It was probably to divert the attention of people from suffering that Harsha proceeded to a relentless persecution of the Damadas, or feudal landlords, throughout the valley who had become rebellious. Kalhana records revolting details of the cruelties perpetrated by Harsha on the Damadas. To meet unforeseen contingencies, Harsha opened a new leaf in the annals of Kashmir. Up to this time, the kings of Kashmir relied solely upon their Hindu soldiers, but Harsha enlisted Muslims and organized the army on a new model. Each group of 100 soldiers was placed under the charge of a Muslim commander, thus making it impossible for his soldiers to hatch plots or run away from the battlefield. In Rajatarangani, Kalhana writes that Harsha's son, named Boja, set out for battle in order to burn Kalasha to the ground. The army of Susala was defeated by Prince Boja. However, during the rebellion of the Madas, Prince Boja reached Hastikarna with 2 or 3 horsemen. While thus traveling, he felt confident that their kingdom would be protected even if Lord Indra were their enemy. He waited at Rangavata for his servant, to whom his mother gave provision for the journey. Hearing of his servant's approach, he came out of the empty temple where he was living, suspecting nothing. But he was attacked by the rebels. When the treason was discovered, the prince bravely fought, killed the enemy, but he lost his life too. The relentless persecution of the Manas by Harsha inspired them to hatch new plots and open negotiations with Harsha's other archenemies, Uchala and Susala. Harsha's misrule accelerated this process. Avoiding the open plain where the king's troops could assert their superiority, the Damadas under Uchala began marching across the mountains into the capital. They attacked the capital and burnt the palace. Amidst the confusion and disillusionment, open desertion and treason became rampant among the army and royal attendants. Kalhana gives a pathetic description of the unfortunate king's flight from the city by night and pouring rain. The end of Harsha. Supporters of Uchala attacked the king in a mendicant's hut where the king was spending the night and murdered him. Rajatarangani tells us that Harsha died in the Kashmirian era 77 on the 5th day of the bright moon in the Mount of Badra, aged 42 years and 8 months. After the fall of Harsha, Uchala mounted the throne with the help of the Damadas. Kalhana, enclosing his accounts of Harsha's tragic end, gives us the king's horoscope and explains how it foretold that Harsha would become a destroyer of his own family. In conclusion, Harsha was the king of Kashmir from 1089 to 1101 who came to power through a coup while in prison. He was a poet, versed in many languages, and a lover of music and art. However, he was a mix of contradictory values, both cruel, compassionate, liberal, narrow-minded, clever, and cunning. To meet unforeseen contingencies, Harsha opened a new leaf in the annals of Kashmir. He enlisted Muslim soldiers in his army. Each group of 100 soldiers was placed under the charge of a Muslim commander in order to prevent mutiny. Harsha started off as a capable and noble king, but soon ran into financial troubles because of his spending habits. To restore his fortunes, Harsha embarked upon a policy of extreme taxation and looting temples. This naturally created a great deal of resentment. The Damadas often rose in rebellion, but the king crushed them with great ruthlessness. They finally successfully ruled against the king, ending his life and thus the reign of King Harsha. For this presentation, we used 5 references. The first one was M.A. Stein's translation of Kalhan's Rajatarangani. The second is the book Who Are Kashmiri Pandits, written by Bansi Pandit. The third is Islamic Iconoclasm in Kashmir by Rashneek Khair. Next, A History of Kashmiri Pandits by Jialal Kilam. And finally, A History of Kashmir by P.N.K. Bamzai. Thank you.